All right, diving right in today, we're going deep on those key performance indicators you always hear about, the ones focused on quality, health, safety, and environment, QHSE for short.
Yeah, they can be a bit of a mouthful, huh?
They really can. But these KPIs, they're used all over in tons of industries. So we're breaking down a few of the really important ones, kind of like a crash course in how companies track, measure, and try to improve their safety and environmental performance.
Right, like their report card in a way.
Exactly. We've got the explanations, the formulas, the whole 9 yards. So let's kick things off with one you're likely to see pretty often, especially in fields like construction, manufacturing, oil, and gas. That's total recordable case frequency, or TRCF. What's the gist?
Well, TRCF, it basically tells you how many workplace incidents happened that were serious enough to need medical treatment, like beyond just simple first aid, right?
Right.
So we're talking things that led to restricted work duties or even time off.
I see.
And it's calculated per million work hours. That way, it doesn't matter if you're a huge corporation or a smaller company, you can compare apples to apples.
So it levels the playing field.
Exactly. The formula is pretty straightforward. You take the total number of recordable cases, multiply that by 1 million, and then divide by the total number of work hours.
Okay, so let's say a company clocked 2 million work hours and had, I don't know, 5 recordable cases.
In that case, their TRCF would be 2.5. And the general rule is the lower that number, the safer the workplace.
Makes sense. So like a score to aim for.
Yeah. And those targets can really differ between industries. For example, the top oil and gas companies, they try to get that number under 0.5, which is seriously impressive. Meanwhile, for construction, a really good TRCF would be anything below 2.0.
Okay, that's helpful context. Now, let's say someone gets hurt bad enough that they can't come to work for a while. Is that a different metric?
You bet. That's where lost time injury frequency, or LTI things, comes in.
Okay, LTIF. I've heard that one too.
Yeah. It zeroes in on the injuries that result in an employee missing at least one full day of work. The calculation is very similar to TRCF. Number of lost time injuries times 1 million divided by the total work hours.
So if that same company with 2 million work hours had, let's say, 3 lost time injuries.
The TRC would be 1.5. And usually anything under 0.5 is considered stellar for LT.
So why even bother with both TRCF and LTRF? Seems kind of similar.
Well, it's all about nuance, right?
Yeah.
See, LTI shines a light on those more severe incidents, the ones that really hit employees and productivity hard.
Oh, got it. So it's like a deeper dive into the really serious stuff.
Precisely. And then there's another one that gets into those longer-term health issues. That's total recordable occupational illness frequency, or TRCF-LL.
TRCF-LL. Wow, so many acronyms to keep straight.
I know, right? But this one is all about occupational illnesses. Think respiratory problems, hearing loss, skin conditions, those kinds of things. And again, it's measured per million work hours.
So is the formula the same?
Yep. Number of recorded occupational illness cases times 1 million divided by the total work hours.
Okay, so what if a company had, let's say, 3 illness cases out of 1.5 million work hours?
Well, their TRCF-ILL would come out to 2.0. And just like with the others, anything below 0.5 is generally considered excellent.
So a benchmark to strive for.
Absolutely. This KPI is super important because it shows us how work conditions can affect employee health over time. Not just immediate incidents, but the long haul, too.
Okay, switching gears a little bit now, let's talk about transportation, specifically the motor vehicle crash rate, or MVCR. That's going to be huge for any company that does a lot of driving, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
MVCR, it measures how often vehicle crashes happen, either based on the distance driven or the number of work hours. So you've got a couple of ways to calculate it.
But that's interesting. So what are the formulas?
Well, one way is to take the total number of vehicle crashes, multiply by 1 million, and then divide by the total kilometers driven.
Gotcha. And the other way?
You'd multiply the total number of crashes by 200,000, and then divide that by the total number of work hours. That's useful if keeping track of mileage is a bit tricky.
Right, makes sense. So if a company had 5 crashes over 2 million kilometers driven, their MVCR would be?
It'd be 2.5. And a really good score, considered excellent, would be anything below 1.0.
Okay, so that one is all about fleet safety management, basically.
Exactly. Now let's shift to environmental responsibility, another crucial aspect. For this, we've got the environmental damage frequency, or ENDF.
ENDF, what sorts of things does that track?
Well, it's all about the frequency of environmental incidents, like those accidental spills or exceeding pollution limits, those sorts of things.
I see.
So you can calculate it a couple of ways, too. You can take the total number of environmental incidents, multiply by 1 million, and then divide by the total work hours. Or you can take the total number of incidents, multiply by 1,000, and then divide that by the total production, like barrels of oil or tons of whatever they're producing.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's say there were 3 incidents in 2 million work hours. What would the ENDF be?
In that case, it would be 1.5. But ideally, you want 0 incidents, of course. Anything below zero point 0.5 is considered excellent, showing a real commitment to minimizing environmental impact.
Got it. And last but not least, we have Job Safety Analysis Frequency, or JSF. This one sounds more about prevention than anything else.
You got it. JSF is all about those job safety analyses, the JSAs. They're those step-by-step risk assessments that should be done before any kind of risky work starts.
Right. Those are so important.
Exactly. So JSF measures how often those JSAs are actually carried out. And again, we've got a couple of ways to calculate it.
Okay. What are the options?
One is to take the total number of implemented JSAs, multiply by 1 million, and then divide by the total work hours.
Got it. And the other way?
That would be taking the total number of implemented JSAs and dividing that by the total number of jobs or tasks performed, and then multiplying the whole thing by 100.
All right. So let's say there were 500 JSAs done with 2 million work hours. That would give us a JSA of
250. And here's the interesting thing. A higher number is actually better for JSAF. Best practices in industrial safety aim for a JSAF of over 100 per million work hours.
Huh. That is interesting. So a lower JSF might mean they're not planning and assessing risk as much as they should be.
Exactly. It could point to some weaknesses in their safety procedures.
So to recap, we've gone over a whole bunch of QHSE KPIs today. There's TRCF for overall incidents, LTF for the ones involving lost time, TRCF LL for occupational illnesses, MVCR for vehicle safety, ENDF for environmental impact, and finally JSF, which focuses on those proactive risk assessments. Quite a toolbox for evaluating a company's QHSE performance.
Yeah, it really is. And what I think is fascinating is how these KPIs, they don't hold the same weight across all industries. You know, a critical safety concern in one workplace, like a warehouse, may be way less of an issue in another, like, say, a software company, and vice versa.
That's a great point. It's really about understanding the context.
Exactly. Thinking about those differences, it really shows just how important it is to take a tailored approach to QHSE management. There's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. Hopefully everyone listening out there now has a better grasp of what these QHSE KPIs are all about.
Yeah, and maybe a little more insight into how companies are trying to make workplaces safer and protect the environment.
Right, because at the end of the day, that's what matters most.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.
My pleasure.